A group of seniors delve into a questionable business to bring life into their dark days. This ultimately leads them into chaos that dances between fun and dangerous. Police officers chase down a red van driven by the elderly Vitya. He orders his partner Irina to hold the coffin in the back, since if the cops find what's inside, they're done for. Frustrated, the woman scolds him for not having a plan earlier. Weeks ago, Vitya arrived at a nursing home where he saw elderly men carrying colorful coffins to the greenhouse. Meanwhile, nurse Anatolia gambled and took an elderly woman's medicine as her prize. Vitya proceeded inside the awful establishment and asked the manager, Zanka, to see his friend from the army. This surprised her since she hadn't had visitors in months. Just then, Zanka caught Koropolov burning the curtains, so she hurried to quell the flames. They finally reached Vasilich's room only to find him in the middle of an attempt on his life. After getting his friend Vasilich to sleep in the clinic, Vitya shared with Zanka that after the war, they kept in touch through letters. However, life got in the way of them reconnecting. He was just thankful that he arrived in time to save his friend. Zanka sympathized with the man, noting that Vasilich seemed to feel guilt from what he'd done during the war. However, Anatolia dismissed this as their patients being mad. Ignoring this, Zanka shared with Vitya that they didn't have enough medicine since they were getting more tenants and less money. With that, Vitya asked the manager to write the medicine his friend needed so he could buy them. Before he could, the home's benefactor Nikolai and his assistant Vika arrived for a shoot to advertise their foundation. As the group settled in their spots for the video, Anatolia complained to Vitya about how their benefactor gave them chump change and defective coffins since the place was just a cover-up. Soon, Nikolai began his speech, claiming that caring for the elderly was important to him. The man's bodyguard, Vadik, didn't think there was a point to this, so Vika asserted that in this generation, charity was trending and it was her duty to maintain their boss's image. During this, Vitya went to the benefactor's car and peered inside. After the shoot, Zanka reminded Nikolai about the list of things they needed that she sent to his office. However, the man gave them a rickety red van instead, with his foundation's ad campaign plastered on the side. Still, Zanka insisted that they needed other essentials, like a boiler for the cold weather. She also mentioned that none of them knew how to drive the van. Frustrated, Nikolai handed her some cash before leaving. Zanka felt guilty over not getting what they needed, blaming herself for talking to the man poorly. Vitya assured her that what she did was right, but Nikolai didn't care about them since this foundation was for his image. Refusing to believe this, Zanka defended their benefactors since he'd given them what they had. Not wanting to argue further, Vitya just gave her money for Vasilich's medicine. He even volunteered to be their van driver in exchange for lodgings. However, since the home was full, the man ended up at the old greenhouse, surrounded by colorful coffins. The next morning, he joined the other seniors for breakfast, though he was disheartened by the others' lifelessness. A recovered Vasilich joined him, finally recognizing that his friend had visited him. He apologized for yesterday and commented that the nurse gave him something new that made him feel better. This assured Vitya that the new medicine was working. Just then, Irina arrived and Vitya immediately took notice of the sophisticated former actress. With a new goal in mind, the man later picked flowers outside for Irina, but stopped when he noticed certain herbs growing nearby. He then gave the flowers to Irina, but the woman was unimpressed, accusing him of stealing them like how he stole money from Nikolai's car yesterday to give to Zanka. The man smiled and justified that he liked Robin Hood as a kid. Just then, one of the men had a heart attack, drawing everyone's attention. Vitya insisted on calling an ambulance, but Anatolia argued that they had no money for that. Vasilich agreed that with what little money Nikolai gave them, they couldn't do anything but wait for death. However, Vitya had an idea. He showed his friend the special herbs outside, noting that the artist who used to own the place must have grown them and left some seeds. He suggested selling the plants to fund the establishment, but they needed to move them into the greenhouse to hide. With that, they used the coffins as plant beds and moved the herbs into the greenhouse. However, Irina caught them. Vitya defended that they could afford necessities by selling the plants, adding that the government refused to house them anymore, so the elderly were forced to beg for handouts. However, Irina refused to let something criminal answer their problems, so she ordered them to get rid of the plants before she reported them. Despite this, Vitya later took the van to buy gardening materials. By the time he returned, he found that the man who had a heart attack earlier died. Irina mourned for him since he was her friend, noting how medicine might have saved his life. This convinced her to assist in Vitya's schemes, so the trio began working on their secret project. For weeks, they tended to the plants, but they needed a way to dry them afterward. Irina came up with an idea, so she flaunted her swimsuit and asked asked for the keys to the rooftop, excusing that she wanted to sunbathe. This allowed them access to the attic where they used the heat to dry the leaves. Soon enough, they had enough to sell. As Vitya calculated their potential earnings, Irina noticed how Vasilich's health seemed to have improved, wondering if he was dipping into the product. She then revealed that she'd stolen some Ziploc bags from Anatolia to store their produce, and Vitya called her a genius for doing it. She brushed off her compliment, though he insisted that they should go out sometime. With this in mind, Vitya took his friends to a club where they awkwardly tried to get customers. However, the club patrons were suspicious of the elderly merchants. Irina suggested that they needed a middleman, so Vitya tried to strike a deal with the bartender. However, the man insisted that the club wasn't the place for their products. Just then, another club employee warned the bartender that there'd be a police raid, so the man disposed of his products into the sink. Before the trio could process what was happening, officers stormed the place led by Major Timofeev. He wondered about the elderly group in the club, so Irina lied that she, her husband, and his friend were looking for her granddaughter who snuck out. Using her acting prowess, she pretended to panic. This convinced the major to let the trio leave before proceeding with their operation. Back in their van, Irina unleashed her frustration as she feared that they were going to jail. However, they still needed to sell their goods, so Irina suggested a new plan. The next day, she took the men to the nearby town where they found 3 old ladies quietly sitting on a bench. Irina acted like she was considering moving to the place since it was peaceful, and this prompted the old ladies to start gossiping about their neighbors. From their gossip, they got the apartment number of Dimka, whom his neighbors believed was using questionable herbs. The group then cornered the man and urged him to help them sell over the internet. With that, Dimka taught Vitya how to find clients using his phone. This worked as Vitya managed to get 3 clients by dinner time, though he still needed a way to transfer the items. Just then, smoke came out of the vents, so he hurried to the attic and found Koropolov burning his products. After sending the crazed man away, the trio hurried to quell the flames and disperse the smoke. Vitya then yelled at Irina for not closing the door. Offended, the woman slapped him before storming off. After she left, the 2 men started laughing together. The rest of the tenants also got a big lift in their moods as the effects of the smoke took over them. Later, Vitya went to Irina to apologize for what he'd said. He then told her the story of when he first saw a peacock in the zoo. It was beautiful, so he tried to lure it with toffee, even though there was a sign discouraging people from feeding the animals. The toffee allowed him to pet the peacock, but a week later, he learned that the bird died from choking on the candy. To his surprise, Irina laughed at his sob story, thinking how foolish he was as a kid. She then closed her book and instinctively used a leaf as a bookmark. This gave her an idea of how to discreetly transfer their products. The next day, the trio went to the library and searched for books that wouldn't be taken by anyone else. They used these books to transfer the products to their clients, and the added visitors also improved the library's business. Soon, Vitya withdrew their earnings, which was more than enough for a boiler and medicine. With the extra funds, the group wondered about using some of the earnings for their pleasure. With that, the trio happily went shopping, providing Zanka with everything that she listed for Nikolai. When asked how he got the money, Vitya lied that he sold Bitcoin and even gave her gifts to discourage her from asking questions. The other tenants also got other luxurious items, bringing life into their little home. One night, Vitya took everyone on a night out, filling a karaoke bar with dancing seniors. Vasilich even got the attention of a beautiful woman, though Anatolia was pissed that she wasn't getting any action. Meanwhile, Vadik reported to Nikolai that a new competitor had emerged, so the boss ordered him to investigate it. Vika also reminded her boss that he was scheduled to appear at the home for the elderly tomorrow. She even claimed that she already had a lead on who their competitor was, telling the men to install the Telegram app to find out. After a night of partying, Zanka and Anatolia found the lady from the bar in Vasilich's bed the next morning. Later, Nikolai recorded his new video. Though with the tenants looking better, his speech about raising funds for them sounded questionable. He then presented them with a second-hand boiler, but Anatolia revealed that they already had a new one. Still, he recorded himself presenting money to Zanka. Vitya pulled the manager away, reminding her that they didn't need Nikolai's money anymore. However, Zanka insisted that he'd been their benefactor for years while she didn't trust how Vitya got his money. The man pointed out that Nikolai was using their home to cover up his suspicious business. With this in mind, Zanka decided to return their benefactor's money. This humiliated the man, so he berated the tenants before leaving. Not long after, Vadik's men tracked the new transactions in the library. Noticing this, Irina alerted her accomplices just as the men cornered her. Afraid, she toppled bookshelves over the men before running back to the van. Vadik soon reported this to Nikolai, though they didn't recognize Irina from the elderly home, thinking that she was someone else's accomplice. Vika suggested having Nikolai buy off their competitor, but the man preferred to fight for his territory. That night, Vitya suggested destroying their business before they got discovered. His concern grew as he received an offer to buy their stocks. With which he believed to be from either the police or a competitor. While fueling up at the gas station, Irina asked what they'd do next. Vicha assured her that they had enough money to last for a while, though she worried that things would end up going back to normal. Just then, officers arrived at the gas station and a nervous Vasilich dropped some product, thus getting him arrested. Seeing this, Vicha and Irina went to the police station, but couldn't risk exposing their operation. Irina berated her companion for getting his friend arrested, so she suggested coming clean to Zanka, believing that she'd help. By the time they returned, however, Major Timofeev was already there, having told Zanka about the products found in Vasilich's pockets. He asked to speak to Vicha alone, so the ladies left. After their conversation, Vicha revealed to Irina that he needed 5 million rubles for Timofeev to close their case and release his friend. To do this, he decided to sell to the competitor who contacted him, but he refused to take Irina to make the transaction, believing that it'd be dangerous. However, the woman insisted on joining him, asserting that they were partners in this. With that, they stored their remaining products in a coffin and loaded it in the van. Anatolia caught them in the act, so she rushed to call the police. This, however, prompted the tenants to finally stand up to their uncaring nurse. They cornered the woman while Koropolov rejoiced at the burning greenhouse that destroyed the evidence of Vicha's crimes. In the morning, however, traffic officers caught Vicha speeding, so they began the car chase that made Irina scold her companion for not having a plan. Vicha turns into a dirt road to lose the cops while Irina holds on to the coffin to keep it from spilling. Lucky for them, a tractor accidentally blocks the police officer's car. Just when Vicha thinks the coast is clear, however, the cops manage to take another route to block them. Thinking quickly, Irina pretends to mourn over her husband in the coffin, acting as if they were on their way to bury it. Vicha then excuses that he was speeding since the gravediggers have been waiting for them. Because of this, the officers suggest that they escort them to the cemetery to ensure that they arrive safely. With no choice, Vicha follows them. And when he claims that the diggers have left, the officers volunteer to help them bury the coffin. The two play along to avoid trouble, and once the officers leave, they hurry to dig up the coffin and retrieve it. However, the officers return since they left something. Vicha lies that he buried his friend with his jacket, which still has his pension ID, so he was retrieving it. The cops buy this, so they help rebury the coffin, forcing Vicha to dig it up again later. By sunset, they finally take the coffin out, only for Nikolai and his men to find them surprised that the seniors were his competitors. Realizing that he was their contact, Vicha asked the man to proceed with their deal so he can sell their products. However, Nikolai teases that they are already in a cemetery, so disposing of them would be easier. He laughs at their audacity to sell in his territory while using his coffins and his van. However, he doesn't see them as a threat, so he orders them to leave. Undeterred, Irina calls out the man for going back on his word since they had a deal. She insists on getting the money to bail Vasilich out while Vadik advises his boss to just get rid of the elders. Frustrated, Nikolai holds Irina at gunpoint while Vadik apprehends Vicha. Still, the woman berates him, calling him a coward for using firearms to cheat his way out. This offends Nikolai, so he points out how other than the weapons, he owns a lot of the things around the area, including the clubs, hotels, and even the cops. He then gives Irina his gun, challenging her to prove that she's braver than him by shooting him. To everyone's surprise, the woman actually pulls the trigger, hitting Nikolai's ear. This is the signal that prompts Timofeev's task force to storm in. They apprehend Nikolai and his men, revealing that the major's deal with Vicha was apparently to help in the gang's arrest. However, he still has to face the court for his misdeeds, with Timofeev promising to testify for him to lower his sentence. Soon, the trio face their charges in court, with Zanka, their fellow tenants, and even Anatolia appearing for their defense. Zanka asserted to the judge that what they did was to provide her and their tenants with basic necessities, so it wasn't out of selfishness. Ultimately, the judge sentences Irina and Vasilich to 3 years in prison, while Vicha gets 5 years for being the mastermind. As they're taken away, Irina lingers beside Vicha, unable to say goodbye. The man then smiles at her, assuring her that he'll be fine. 5 years later, Vicha is released from prison and Irina picks him up. To his surprise, she takes him to Nikolai's mansion since their group was awarded the property. They even have a beautiful peacock to greet the returning tenant. After surviving their horrible conditions, the seniors are now living a grand life with Koropolov even rekindling his love for flames through grilling food. Zanka remains as their caretaker, while Anatolia is now helping the ladies exercise. Vasilich is also happy and clean. Thus, Vicha gains the happy ending he wanted for his friend. To ensure this paradise remains, the man even steps on a particular herb still growing in the garden, refusing to let such temptations drag them down again.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.